Most women don't even realize how early the shame starts. By the time you're 7, you've already absorbed like this idea that your body is something to manage, maybe even something to hide. And by the time you're 30 or you're 40 or even 50, you've carried that shame so long that it feels like it belongs to you. And so if you've ever stood in front of a mirror and picked apart your face, your stomach, your hair color, if you've ever avoided intimacy, even because you didn't feel enough, or if you've ever looked at younger photos and looked at yourself and said, man, why didn't I appreciate that body while I had it, right? So you're not alone today. And this conversation is for all of you. So, after reading countless studies and listening to hundreds of women's stories, and even walking through this myself, I found that while body shame can take on so many different shapes, it often centers around three main core areas for women. Okay. And so those three are weight in our body shape, that constant pressure to shrink, to tighten, to fit this particular mold. The second one is aging in our appearance, the fear of becoming invisible or irrelevant as we grow older, losing our value because of the way we look. And then the third one has to do with our sexuality and our self-worth. We feel often disconnected and undesirable, or even ashamed of how our body just feels or even functions, right? And so these aren't vanity issues that we're talking about today. I want to make that very clear. They're soul level stories and issues that we deal with every day. And so today we're going to go ahead and begin rewriting them. We'll be talking about this topic for the next 3 weeks. But I'm not here to tell you just love your body. I know that feels totally impossible, maybe today, for many of you. And so I'm here to help you just today name that shame you've carried for so long so that you can finally take that step towards not having to carry it alone. Okay. So this isn't about fixing anything today. It's about finding yourself again. And I promise she's still in there. She's always been there, and you're going to find her. So let me go ahead and we're going to talk about the things that you have tried and why they didn't work. Because let me just guess, like you've tried everything, right, to feel better in your body. And you've read the books, tried the diets, done the affirmations. You've told yourself just to be grateful and focus on your health. And then you've even tried ignoring that person in the mirror altogether. But I want you to hear me very clearly. This is not your fault. Okay. And those things didn't just fail because you're broken. They failed because they weren't designed to heal the root of the shame. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and just real quickly run over a few of the common things that women do to fix themselves, right? These things, while some of them sound really good, they aren't really going after the heart of what is going on inside. So the number one is body positivity movement. Being told to just love your body sounds so empowering. I mean, it really does, until you try it and then you realize it doesn't magically just erase decades of shame. For many women, it just becomes another standard that you failed at. Okay. The second one we often will try tons of weight loss and fitness programs. I can tell you, I probably have tried all of them in my lifetime, right? And these promise confidence, but often deliver only temporary relief from that deeper shame that we carry. You might feel better in that moment, but it doesn't actually deal with how you feel about yourself internally. And the reason why I know that is because if you ever go back to gaining that weight, how do you feel about yourself then? Right? You didn't deal with the part that felt the shame. You just went and dealt with the external parts. So, number three, focusing on just health over looks. Okay. And being a health coach, this is like a fine line. I've dealt with and worked with so many clients. This is a fine line because they do care about their health. But when you get down to the heart of it, this is, it just sounds so noble. But health, it can get very twisted into this like new metric of worthiness. And so if you don't feel healthy or energized one day, that shame, it just takes on this new disguise and you end up still feeling that shame. Your body's still an enemy, right? And then mindset alone, mindset, it's very powerful and it does control so many parts of our life. And so I'm not negating its power and use in we deal with all of this. But our body, it stores emotion, right? You can't just think your way into pushing that stored emotion out, right? So if you feel it, let's go ahead and name it and then start relating to that part of our body differently. Okay. Number 5, the spiritual bypass or just even being silent about it. In church culture, especially, there's this like unspoken rule, right? We don't talk about body image. So when you feel that shame, you also feel this very deep guilt that you're even carrying this, right? And so that's really sad. And that's why I want to talk about this today. So if those things haven't worked for you, it's not because you're weak, right? It's because you're a woman who's been surviving a system that benefits from your disconnection. Okay. And that's why this space right here on this live stream or on the podcast or in the YouTube channel, it's totally different. We're not trying to fix you. We're here to just help free you. So let's just talk about where it begins. Okay. Body shame doesn't just show up out of nowhere. It's not something we're born with. It's something we kind of inherit or absorb or even interpret. Okay. And so for most women, it starts way earlier than we actually realize. Okay. So by the time we're 5, maybe 6, 7, or 8, right, we're already picking up messages from all the people around us. And we learn what is considered beautiful, what's acceptable, what's good enough, and it doesn't take someone outright telling you that you're ugly or you're fat. It actually comes from very subtle messages initially. It could be just a teacher who is always complimenting those thin girls, right? Or the girls who have long hair or whatever. It could be that a parent who is constantly just dieting or criticizing their own body. And then it could even come from a comment like, you have your dad's nose, right? So those are the things that kind of stick into your mind. And so we're watching, we're listening, we're internalizing these experiences. And so we start shaping this quiet belief. And so we won't even know that we're doing it, but you'll learn something like something isn't just right about me. And so I remember thinking, this is so funny. I remember thinking that I was dying when I first got my period at the age of 10, okay? Because I hadn't been told what to expect yet. It happened earlier than people thought. And so I didn't understand what was even happening. And so I felt shame, I felt fear, I hid. And that became kind of like the tone that I carried into my body about my femininity for many years. And so when your body is changing and no one's talking to you about it, your mind, it starts filling in these blanks, right? And you start thinking like, must be something wrong with me. And so, and then many of us, raised in Christian homes, the message gets even more complicated and more confusing. Modesty, it's not, it's taught as a virtue, right? But often it's taught through shame. So, and this is what I mean. You're told, cover up, don't tempt, be careful how you dress. Right. And those are all important things to learn. I'm not saying that, but suddenly we take on this thought like my body is a liability, right? Something I need to manage. So we don't want to make anyone stumble. And then without even knowing it, we start carrying the weight of everyone else's thoughts about us as if their thoughts are our fault. And so we go from God made you really good, right? To my body might be actually dangerous. And that shift, it kind of can cause a scar in our lifetime. And so you didn't just wake up one day. That's what I want to make clear. You didn't just wake up one day and decide that you didn't love your body or that you hated your body or that your body was an enemy, right? Shame was taught, whether it was intentional or not. It was something we picked up. And then once we can see that clearly, we're able to begin to unlearn it. Okay. For so many women, body shame, it doesn't start in front of a mirror. It starts in a classroom. It starts at the dinner table. It starts right there in the church pew even, okay? It starts with this quiet pressure to be the good girl, Okay. Be polite, be quiet, be helpful, be thin, be pretty, whatever the message is. But, be pretty, but not too pretty, right? Be seen, but don't be distracting. And then be excellent, but don't make anyone else feel uncomfortable, right? That's why it gets so confusing. And then before you know it, your worth is no longer rooted in who you actually are as a daughter of the king, but in how well you perform and how well you disappear or how well you make others feel comfortable, even at your own expense. And so I can talk about this because I was the oldest child of a pastor and a Christian principal, right? She was a teacher and a principal. And I knew how to sit still, smile just right, make good grades. I even played sports I didn't love just so that I could stay in that box of being the good one, right? But I didn't know what I loved. I didn't even know me at all, right? What I did know, though, was that my body was a project, one that I could never quite get right. So I was either looking too tired or I was too energetic and too intense or or just whatever it meant, right? You know, I just felt out of place. I was failing in my mind to achieve this invisible standard. And I know I've talked about that ideal woman way back in many episodes ago. And that's what I was trying to achieve is this ideal woman that I had developed in my mind. And so over time, I learned to be a servant, but I forgot to be a soul or a person who has needs, right? And so this is what perfectionism steals, not just your joy, but your connection to your body. And that's just so sad, right? You can be praised your whole life for how good you are, but still feel completely disconnected from the person you were meant to be, right? That person that has purpose and significance, and God has a plan for you. But here's the invitation that I want for you today. What if you didn't have to earn that right to rest or to feel or to take up space in your own life? Right? Like, if any of that hits home for you that I've talked about so far, if you realize just how long you've been like bending and pleasing and performing just feel acceptable, let me just pause and say this to you right now. You don't have to keep doing that. You're allowed to exist in your body without explaining anything. You're allowed to take up space without apologizing for anything. And so you're allowed to stop managing your shame like it's your job. Okay. And so I want to give you something to help you begin that process today, although we will be talking more in the coming weeks. Something that's simple but super powerful. And it's the first step towards breaking yourself free from this body shame. And they call it the shame origin map. This is just kind of a gentle exercise that helps you trace where your body shame actually started, and how to recognize it live when you're experiencing, but it's not done in a very vague way. In fact, it's very specific, and it's a story-based way that can help you start releasing it. So what you're going to do is you're going to ask yourself these three questions, okay? What's the first moment you remember feeling ashamed of your body? And then the second question is who or what influenced that experience? And then the third one, what did that moment teach you to believe? And is that belief even still true? Okay. So what you're going to do is you're just going to write freely, whatever comes up. Like, don't hesitate and question what you're writing. Just literally put a pen in your hand and free flow write. And pen to paper does have a much deeper connection to your emotional and your physical your experience. So I suggest at this one point in time, you don't use a digital device if you can help it. But don't filter anything. You're not going to try to fix anything. What happens is when you find your belief that you're ready to let go of, I want you to write this sentence underneath it. Okay. This doesn't belong to me anymore. And then I want you just to symbolically in your mind lay that at Jesus's feet, and I want you to leave it there. Okay, that's the first step. It doesn't mean that you won't wake up the next day feeling this shame still, but you've opened up yourself to the idea that this idea is not mine anymore. So now I need to do the practical things to start helping myself actually walk that out. And so, to make this completely easier for you, I did create, just like I always do, a free workbook for this week's live stream. And it does include the shame origin map. So it's available right inside the Facebook group, Making Life Beautiful Again. Go ahead and head over there, download the workbook, work through it at your own pace. It could take you all week just to kind of identify this belief that you've been carrying. But if you feel so led, please share your experience in the Facebook group. You know, it's a great way to help me, for one, hold that space for you and begin praying for you. But it also is good for each other to see that they're not the only ones that, women, we often think we're the crazy one. And then when you start kind of talking about it in a safe place, you realize, oh, this is a common lie that the devil wants us as women to believe, right? And so it's just a great way to even dig deeper on that, because you'll hear someone else's experience and it might trigger something else for you to remember. So today it was about naming the shame. And so now you'll be able to see where that lives, even in the cellular part of your body, how it started, how deeply it has shaped the way you see yourself. But next week, we're going to start breaking up with those lies. Okay. And so, because so many of us are still living by rules that we never even really agreed to, rules that say you must be thin to be worthy, or you must be modest to be good, or youthful to be lovable, right? Like next week's live stream, we'll be actually learning how to delete these messages, the old operating system that's been draining your soul and your energy. And so until then, I want you to be really kind to yourself. You've really done a great job by just showing up here and starting your healing. So we'll go ahead and see you next week.